Where are we going today, Chris?
We're going down to Cleve Prior, Mike, near Evesham, to work on a church which I look after. A few Cotswold slates to replace on the roof, and there's also a few more modern Victorian tiles to replace.
How did you become a roofing contractor? You left school at 16, I think?
Well, I left school at 17. I was in sixth form at school, and in the sixth form common room with the sun shining through the beautiful sash windows, I thought I need to be outside doing something. And then I felt there was a need in our area to provide a decent service with roofing, and I've always been interested in buildings as well, and that's when the business started.
So from the outset you decided to be a roofer?
I did, yes. It's always fascinated me, roofing and the roofs of buildings.
No family connections?
There is a small family connection, yes. My brother's a bricklayer as well. Roofs have held a fascination because most of the time on older buildings they're completely unaltered.
What skills are involved? Let's take the mental skills first of all. What do you do when you're sizing up a job?
You need to look at the building as a whole. I do try and disregard the present owners if I can, and look at the building, what the building requires, and then fine-tune it to whatever the customer needs or can afford to carry out on that particular building at that time. Try to build up a programme of work over months or even years sometimes to bring that building back to standard. But it is the building as a whole I'm looking at, basically to do the best job I can on it.
What about the physical skills that you use? Carpentry, obviously, and the others?
Carpentry, leadwork is another skill, which is obviously centuries old as well, which you need to be quite handy with. A little bit of bricklaying, whereas you are rebedding ridge tiles, etc. Guttering, put lots of cast guttering back up, and new cast guttering, so you need to be okay with a paintbrush as well if you can.
How did you learn those skills?
That's a good question to ask somebody who's been gifted with skills. I always think it's a gift. I just think it becomes natural. You do tend to, when you're working, there seems to become a flow with the work. Not on a cold morning, but after a little while it does become a flow. So it's a difficult question to answer. I think it becomes natural, or as natural as it possibly could be.
It is a windy day, but it's not really as windy as it sounds, because behind where we're standing is a row of poplar trees, 20 or so of them. They must be over 100 feet high, so they're catching every bit of wind that comes. So whilst it is windy, it's not as terrible as it sounds. Who are we going to see?
Well, hopefully we'll see one of the church wardens. His name's Rod. Rod tends to inform me what's gone wrong on the roof, and I promptly try and repair it.
How did you get on to Chris? Why do you use him as opposed to anybody else?
Well, it came through our vicar actually, because I think Chris had done some work on the vicarage roof, which is a pretty old building as well, and Richard the vicar was impressed with his work, so we approached him. I mean, we were going down the line of having to have a complete new roof, which even with a grant from English Heritage would have meant that we still had to find about £85,000 ourselves, which really was beyond. So Chris came and had a look, and he said, well, in his opinion, if we did an ongoing repair, the roof would last for a considerable length of time. So that's the course we've gone. And obviously he comes a couple of visits a year possibly, and we find that the cost of doing it that way is very modest, and it's within our budget, and we keep the water out.
When was the church built?
I think it goes back to about 1200, which I assume would have been the chancel, and I suppose it grew like topsy. You know, it was added a bit at a time. Do you want to go inside, or do you want to go?
Yes, yes. Okay. Why do they always have yew trees in churchyards?
I don't know. I have heard various theories, but that the yew wood was suitable for making either bows or arrows. If you see on that buttress those grooves, there are theories that was where arrows were sharpened. I think it's more likely to have been agricultural sickles.
There are some real gouges down there.
Yeah, yes.
Bernard Miles used to have an old joke about the effigy in a particular church, and he said it was the best bit of sharpening stone in the whole of Sussex.
Yes.
Let's go in.
It says here that there was a church here in 872.
Good Lord. So the roof is really like the spars of a ship, upside down.
It is, Mike. It's almost an inverted hull, isn't it, really, when you look at it from the inside. There's a boarding as well, which is fitted on the uppermost part of these timbers, which seals the roof again. And this is where I think some of the problem is that they've laid a sarking felt on the board and then put a batten on and then fixed the old slate to that. I think originally we'd have seen pegs inside here, an old split willow batten with oak pegs, and it may have well been visible from inside as well. It's belt and braces, isn't it? As ever. I always find this when I'm stripping off roofs. Very practical, tend to be over-engineered and built to last, which is the important thing.
Could we go up the tower?
Yes, of course we can.
Up the stairs. Wow.
You out of breath, Mike?
Got my breath back. How many steps do you reckon that was, Chris?
Well, Rod informs us this is approximately 90.
I would have said more myself.
It feels like more.
In total darkness sometimes.
It is indeed.
But it's magnificent when we get up here. If you look over to the east, you can see the roof that you've been looking after.
You can indeed,
There's
yes.
a Victorian bit on the extension.
There is.
And the bit you've been doing is Cotswold stone. What's your plan for today? How are you going to go about this?
Well, we've come up onto the top of the tower with Rod.
Yes.
This is an area of roof I've looked at before with him. Going around the church, looking from a distance, looking at what areas need attention. On this end of the building we've got some handmade tiles, clay tiles.
How are they held on?
Dependent, and a lot of these are pegged on. Originally I guess they were oak pegged. Some of these have been refixed with steel nails, which are now rotting. Hence the loss on the elevations you see. It's a random slate roof, meaning that it's a diminished course, whereas the slates at the lower section of the roof where the guttering starts are larger than at the top.
So how many slates are you going to do today?
I think there's about a dozen to replace. Some are slipped, repin, and just make the best of, really. It's an ongoing process.
And all of this can be reached from a ladder on the ground?
Yes, the majority, it's a simple access. Most is at guttering level where the loss is. There's a few at ridge level, which I can safely reach from a ladder. But if there's any larger works, obviously that's a scaffolding job, really. Eventually that'll come.
Back on the ground, Chris began his meticulous inspection and repair work.
What I'm doing at the moment is I'm stood back from the church, some 20 feet, looking over the entrance, and there's a slate at the top. It's some 4 inches by about 6 inches in height, and it needs to ideally be replaced. But with my ladders, I may cause damage elsewhere. Now I know there's not a leak, on the church in that area, and there's a sarking felt and an old bitumen roofing felt underneath the slate. So what do? Do we decide to get onto the roof in that area and possibly cause more damage, or do we leave alone? So that's what I'm just deciding to do at the moment, and I may go back round the church and come back to this section afterwards when I've decided what to do.
So that's going on in your head.
It is
whilst
indeed.
You're doing all the other jobs.
Yes, it is. Just localised repair. Try and keep the cost down a little bit for them. I've got a couple of pieces of slate here. I've got one of my replacement pieces. They have a good ring to them. They're Cotswold stone slate. Now,
About 7 inches by 4.5?
Yes,
5,
approximately.
with a hole in the top.
Indeed, these are some of the smaller ones off the roof. The replacement one you see has a hole in it. The one I've taken off the roof, which is moss covered and lichen covered, the hole's missing. So
that's where it's broken off, right
indeed
at the
it has,
top.
yes it has. As I said before, they've used a steel fixing, perhaps a Victorian repair, I'm not too sure. So when this goes back in, I'll try and introduce a stainless steel fixing into it to keep it in there. But once again, it's so fragile, when you try to move one, you end up disturbing others, which hopefully you don't want to do.
It weighs quite a lot, over a pound, I would say.
Indeed it does, and this is one of the smaller ones.
So the roof is going to be quite heavy.
It is indeed, very, very heavy. Obviously the structure was built to hold the weight of these, specifically for the stone slate.
It's a lovely way, the way the old slate is covered in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bits of lichen.
Indeed.
It looks very healthy round here. If you get lichen like that, it takes a
Yes.
long time to grow, but it looks nice and green.
The only trouble for us is it's additional weight again on that roof, especially today
when
it's
it gets
wet.
Yes.
And as in today, that moss is wet, and that's adding a fair bit to that slate.
I wonder how old that original slate is.
It's hundreds, isn't it? It's
Got to be hundreds,
definitely.
isn't it? And there's a smooth side
There
where
is.
it's split,
Indeed.
and a rough or sort of semi-rounded
Yes.
side, which they haven't bothered to treat.
Indeed. And obviously produces the character that we see. But therein lies the skill of the original chaps who laid it, to pick a piece of slate and lay it. Each one would have been sorted and chosen for the way it laid against each other. And they may go through 6 slates before they found the right one for that particular
Bit
piece.
like dry stone walling, I suppose.
Indeed it is, yes. Yeah. And a very similar finished job, really. It's practical waterproof, but it provides that that look, which is fantastic. Although it looks random in appearance, it's certainly not when it was laid. A lot of work involved in that.
After an hour or so, Chris had worked his way round to the north wall of the church, where I found him setting up a more extensive series of ladders. Now you're going to use a different ladder. You're not just going to lean that up against the side of the church. This has got a big hook on the top.
It has, Mike.
What sort of job are you going to do with that?
Okay, I'm going to use my roof ladder. Essentially, it has a hook on the end, and that'll go over the crest of the roof.
What I'd call the ridge.
Indeed, and that'll hook on, and it'll enable me to do a quick repair.
What's the problem up there?
Well, I've noticed this morning, which I didn't see on the inspection last week, there's some lead flashing falling away from the wall. It's a stone wall, a stone abutment, and this lead is very difficult to get a satisfactory fixing, basically. They've used old metal cleats, lead wedges over the past, and it's fallen away in one particular part. So I'll refix, and I may well use that dreaded word called silicon. There's a specific lead sealant I can use, which will adhere today, and I can stick that on the back, and it'll hold that lead in place. It's flexible, and I don't need to damage the building in any way at all. So I think that's what I'll do, to do a repair on that.
When the wind has died down.
Definitely.
So up goes the first ladder. And now up goes the, what are you going to call that ladder?
A roof ladder.
Right, the one with the hook on the top to go over the ridge. Sort of thing that television engineers have.
That's it. Quite lightweight as well.
And he's feeding the one with the hook right up to the top on wheels, turns it over, and it's hooked already on the roof ridge. And he's got his squirter, which he's about to apply to the back of the lead, which is on the right angle, joins the tower to the roof itself.
Well, I'm just on the roof, on the lower section of roof, Mike, and there's a section of lead flashing. It's in good order, but it's what I call graffiti. Builders and roofers in the past who have made repairs have inscribed their name on it. Interestingly, many years ago, I worked on a building and they'd done a different sort of graffiti. They'd hammered coins of the realm into the leadwork, and that was dating back to 1650, which was fantastic to see. So there you go.
That was quick.
Well, I don't like to stay on there too long. As we said before, I don't want my weight pressing on those slates. We're on an area of roof at the moment which is quite mossy as well, so I can't fully see what condition the slates are like, and I don't want to disturb them at all anyway. So, job done, quick and easy, weatherproof again.
How do you feel when you've completed a job?
I think that it's a pride that comes with it. I think anyone who works with their hands, and you can, after many years of practice, you can attain a level. I think you feel great pride in it. It isn't a show-off pride, it's a pride in yourself that you've put something back as best as you could, and it's there for another generation again. And it's cured a leak, hopefully. And you've been paid, obviously, which is important.